Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar, Hydrogen Outlook in Brazil and Latin America. This webinar is part of Mayer Brown's Energy Transition Series, in which we are providing thought leadership on marketing developments in what we see are two crucial areas in achieving energy transition, which are hydrogen and batteries. As mentioned, today's program will focus in the energy market in Latin America and Brazil. And we have here with us today our esteemed guest, Rafael Barro, who serves as Executive VP, Global Head of Business Development at ENGIE Green Hydrogen. And we also have here with us my colleagues from Mayer Brown, Jose Valera, Energy Partner based in Rio, Paulo Raggi, and myself, Deborah Yanasi, both energy partners based in São Paulo. The three of us are part of Mayer Brown's Energy Global Group. So let's start the discussions today. I think my first question is directed to Rafael. So Rafael, in your view, what do you think are the business opportunities in Latin America, especially Brazil, for production and sale of the different types of hydrogen? And what do you think are the main hydrogen sources and local markets in this region?
Thank you, Deborah. So first of all, perhaps it is worth reminding that today's world production of hydrogen, 75, 80 million tons per annum, is about 99% originated from fossil fuels. So natural gas, and about 6% of the annual gas consumption is for hydrogen production, or coal, 2%. And it emits significant amount of CO2 in doing so, more than 800 million tons per annum. And this is the same all around the world, including in Latam. So hydrogen is used mostly by the petrochemical industry to refine petroleum products and also to make fertilizers. So when we're talking about market opportunities for hydrogen, we at ENGIE and a lot of other companies as well, we are talking mostly about green hydrogen, right? So this is the production of hydrogen by water electrolysis using renewable energy. So there are other ways to reduce emissions related to current ways of producing hydrogen with fossil fuels. People do carbon capture and storage, but that also brings a lot of additional issues such as storage itself and the fact that natural gas extraction needs to continue to occur in order to produce such hydrogen. So back to the green hydrogen. So worldwide production today is extremely limited, right? So the projects are mostly demonstrators, and industrial scale projects which are operational can mostly counted on the fingers of one hand or two hands. So what is all the hype about then, we can ask, right? So I think in terms of commitments to decarbonize are increasing everywhere around the world. So clearly electrification is an obvious choice for a lot of applications, and that would be probably the preferred choice and way forward in most applications. But there are certain sectors which are more difficult to decarbonize, and this is probably where hydrogen can fit in, to either replace the fossil hydrogen, which is used today, or also potentially as an alternative fuel or an energy vector where batteries don't necessarily provide an optimal solution. So the potential is really not. We're talking possibly of a market, researchers are saying, which could be 50 times greater than what it is today. But the key challenge is really, or the key challenge I would say is today the cost of hydrogen as an alternative, a viable alternative to the gray hydrogen, the fossil hydrogen. So about 2/3 of such costs are related to the production of renewable electricity. The rest is mostly investment cost on the production and the storage facilities of the hydrogen. And this is where Latam, I think, fits in interestingly, because Latam and Brazil have abundant renewable energy, both solar and wind, which combine neatly to provide great locations to produce green hydrogen in the world. Now, this is a good start, but from there, you still need to find economically viable way to sell the hydrogen to potential customers, right? So this is where another factor plays in favor of hydrogen in Latam, and I think particularly in Brazil, at least today. And this is the cost of natural gas is fairly high compared to other places in the world. So potentially, the gap between fossil hydrogen and renewable hydrogen is less in Brazil or in Latam because of as I said, the high renewable load factor and also the high gas prices. But there's still a fairly big gap. Okay, so the challenge clearly is still here. So concretely, we're working at ENGIE on various initiatives in Latam. I can list a few for you. So in Chile, we are developing a project with a company called NIX, that is to supply green hydrogen to an ammonia production facility, a new one that NIX would build. We're also working on a hydrogen fuel cell powertrain for heavy duty mobility for the mining sector. This is to move very, very large trucks around the mine. We also have a small, already producing H2 facility that supplies hydrogen to Walmart for their forklifts. In Brazil, we have started a feasibility study to blend hydrogen with natural gas into a pelletizing plant on a mining site. We are also studying a couple of sites where we could produce hydrogen for export after transformation into ammonia or methanol. We're also supporting other countries such as Colombia and clients with the energy transition roadmap through consultancy service that we have. And H2 is always a topic of interest. And finally, we also have teams on the lookout for opportunities in other countries, but we try to stay very focused in order to avoid spreading things or resources. And so, yeah, I think that would be a good introduction.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting, Rafael, your view on this and how hydrogen will compete with the gas space, right? And gas prices help this insertion of the hydrogen in our matrix. And very interesting that there are several projects in Latin America already under development, right? And taking that subject, I want to ask Jose, in Latin America in general, your view, how are countries developing strategies and regulations towards this increased production of hydrogen?
Yes, all the countries in Latin America, to one extent or another, have relative advantages when it comes to increasing the use of green hydrogen. Some countries have most of its electricity already based on renewable sources, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Costa Rica. So they're looking at decarbonizing other sectors of their economies. And so basically, the national strategies that are coming out are looking at three things. One is decarbonizing the existing production of hydrogen, which is taking place in virtually every country in Latin America already. Number two, increase the demand for hydrogen that is produced on green hydrogen. And number three, have surpluses of green hydrogen for the export market. The export market is not only pure hydrogen, but also the products that are low carbon. For example, talking about Chile that Rafael mentioned, Chile has an extraordinary opportunity, and Peru too. These are the two largest, or among the two largest copper mining countries in the world. They have an opportunity to produce copper on a low carbon basis by electrifying stationary sources and using hydrogen fuel cells for the trucks. And therefore, that copper that would be exported would immediately have a value added represented by its low carbon composition relative to other copper. So same with ammonia. Ammonia is a compound of hydrogen and nitrogen. So if that hydrogen is green, that ammonia would have added value commercially simply because of that characteristic. So something that the governments are doing is along these lines. In addition to that, they are facilitating financing, not only for pilot projects, but also for research and development of pilot ideas. Some tax benefits concerning accelerated depreciation or even tax credits in relation to capital investments made for the production of hydrogen, etc. So we're seeing a great variety of approaches and ideas that countries have that are suited to the particulars of what the country is best prepared to do in these initial phases.
That's very interesting, Jose. Thank you for this overview. And I'd like to ask Paulo specifically about Brazil. And it's interesting that Jose mentioned that each country is developing a specific regulatory framework to encourage hydrogen production. Where we stand here in Brazil? What's the regulatory framework for hydrogen in Brazil? And what are the gaps? What needs to be done here?
That's a very good question, Deborah, because here in Brazil, as soon as the government issued the National Hydrogen Program in last July, this question straightly came up from everyone involved in the sector and in the market. So given the background of the Brazilian economy and the Brazilian general regulation, which is where the state has a heavy presence, and what we have in practice different from what is written in the Constitution, because we have theoretically a free enterprise system, but in practice what we have is a regulated enterprise system. So the question that came up from everyone involved, scholars, law firms, entities, was who will regulate the hydrogen in Brazil? And then we started to have some discussions about which of the regulatory agencies will encompass hydrogen as well. But we actually pointed out a previous question to that, which was whenever we started to analyze the hydrogen chain and we started to separate the activities involved in the hydrogen chain, we saw that actually they were, or they are, most of them already regulated under a specific set of rules, despite the fact that none of the current laws and agencies precisely regulate hydrogen. So the question that we bring up is, do we need additional regulation to what we have in order to develop a project of hydrogen in Brazil? And when we go further, and just making a parenthesis, whenever we question the need of regulatory set of rules, it doesn't mean that they are not subject to laws. Any project already has to comply with every set of laws in Brazil, from environmental, technical aspects, labor, taxes, and etc. What we question is, do we need an additional regulatory concession, license, or authorization to simply develop a hydrogen project? And when we started to make the separation of the chain, we'll see that the upstream of the chain, if you're having a project for industrial production, which is the separation of hydrogen from other molecules, the upstream chain will be already under a certain set of regulations. And for instance, if you're having a green hydrogen project, the obtention of the electricity will be already under the electricity laws in Brazil from ANEEL's jurisdiction, and the same would apply for the water that will come for the electrolysis. It's already under a certain set of laws. The same thing applies for gray and blue hydrogen. We already have INP and the hydrocarbons legal framework in Brazil. So whenever we separate, we see that just a factory or a plant that will be doing the industrial production of hydrogen, that will not need an additional regulation for so. So the conclusion is that the set of laws that we currently have in Brazil, as they are perfect. They fit already any project of hydrogen. We would have just a special parenthesis for white hydrogen that I will not enter here in details, but for every other major project of hydrogen, we understand that the framework already is already enough. So any company with any hydrogen project can start developing the project in Brazil right now.
Great, Paulo. And as Rafael pointed out, ENGIE already has projects under development in Brazil. And I completely agree that we do have a very solid power, oil and gas, environmental, regulatory framework for project development in the energy industry. But let's keep on looking at how this national energy program evolves, right, under the Ministry of Mines and Energy. And Rafael, taking what Paulo mentioned about the regulatory structure here in Brazil, And what Jose also mentioned, that other countries are also creating specific incentives for the market. I want to hear your thoughts on how do you see this expansion of the hydrogen industry will be in the short, midterm in Latin America and Brazil, right? And also considering the economic, political context of Latin America and Brazil.
Well, that's a vast subject. I think we very briefly touched upon the fact that development of hydrogen is a thorny path, right? So I think in terms of what we can advocate for is that it's important to have clearly laid out rules, regulations, and whether we need new rules, new governmental body that's going to oversee them or not. It is really not something for us to to say. I think it's for the regulatory bodies to decide and the legislator. What we want and what we advocate for is clear rules, clear policy, because this is what is going to be required in order to make long-term commitments towards the development of hydrogen projects, whether it is from the producers or the consumers will have to commit to long-term purchase agreements, or the manufacturers. So we welcome those initiatives. We also, of course, support all financial subsidies mechanism which can contribute to the development. And of course, you touched upon that a little bit earlier, whether it is for the manufacturers of H2 product, which is maybe not so much the case in Latin America, but it is somewhere else around the world. For investors, in respect of their CapEx investment endeavors, these could also take the form of tax break for producers, incentives for consumers to switch from the current fossil hydrogen to green or greener hydrogen. So I suppose we also understand that not all countries will be able to contribute financially in a similar manner. What is important is that the incentives are flexible enough to develop projects locally and to compete in the local and then potentially later on in the global markets, again, with clear rules, regulations, to do so swiftly, safely, and of course, in compliance with environmental rules and social regulations.
Great. I also want to hear Jose. It's a similar question related to how do you perceive that the market will expand in the following years in Latin America in general? What's the potential of the market here?
The potential for the market in Latin America is very big, and what is going on right now is investments in relation to the development of scale for the production of hydrogen, which is one category of operation, and then the increased use of hydrogen, which is a separate matter. And then in some cases, how you transport the hydrogen from production to consumption. So a number of the pilot projects going on in many countries today are geared towards the scaling up of the production of green hydrogen. And in most cases, these projects are co-located with facilities for the use of that hydrogen, because the long-term transportation of hydrogen by pipeline or by ship presents unique issues that haven't quite yet been addressed yet. So most of what we're seeing is co-location of production and use in connection with these pilot projects. And that use is mostly for matters that cannot be solved from a carbon mitigation perspective by simple electrification. That is the production of ammonia, the use of hydrogen in refineries to upgrade heavy crudes, the use of hydrogen in cement making due to the heat that is necessary for the production of cement, etc. So those are the immediate uses that cannot be solved with electrification. Those are the obvious current demand for hydrogen, and that's where these projects are gearing to. A second big category is every country has transportation. Every country has high carbon emissions out of its own transportation activities. So that is a huge common denominator. of a need to produce hydrogen fuel cells for transportation. However, that has its own challenges. Given the vast distribution of the dispensing stations, you're going to have to solve the transportation problem of bringing the hydrogen to the dispensing stations. And right now, if I'm not wrong, in the whole of Latin America, there is less than 2 miles of dedicated hydrogen pipelines, period. In the United States, there is less than 2,000 miles of dedicated hydrogen pipelines. So while hydrogen can be mixed with gas to use existing gas transportation infrastructure, that proportion cannot exceed 15 to 20%. You cannot use an existing gas pipeline for pure hydrogen. And the reason is the steel and the welding of use for gas pipelines is not suitable for hydrogen. Hydrogen is a lot more permeable than natural gas. So at best, you can blend hydrogen with gas to use the existing transportation infrastructure. But eventually, if we want to have a pure hydrogen pipeline transportation infrastructure, then the compound, the composition of the pipeline is going to have to be of a different material. So that's going to be a longer term, meaning produce and consume at separate locations because you need to solve that transportation problem. Then to globalize hydrogen, in addition to exporting low carbon products, that is with green hydrogen input locally, but if you want to, in addition to that, export pure hydrogen, then you need to liquefy it. And then you need to transport it, same as natural gas in the form of LNG. You need to liquefy the hydrogen to transport it by vessel. Well, to transport LNG by vessel is child's play compared to what it takes to liquefy and transport hydrogen as a liquid. It's a completely different situation, a lot more complicated. The boiling point is a lot colder. It's a different technology, different overall transportation infrastructure that is needed. There is a pilot program for a hydrogen carrier vessel. The classification societies and the insurance companies are still figuring out how to do with it and how to norm it. But that's the second aspect of the growth of hydrogen, the solving the transportation issues. But again, on the local use, co-locating production and use, that there are many projects already going with the support of the governments in many cases that we have discussed.
Great, Jose, very interesting. Well, it seems that hydrogen infrastructure, including liquefaction, storage, transportation facilities, will demand intensive capital, right? And as you said, government is supporting some of these projects, but I also want to hear Paulo's thoughts, views on how project financing is for greenfield hydrogen projects here in Brazil. Are we able to structure a project finance for such a project in Brazil?
Yes, Deborah, it is possible to finance in any modality, including project financing any hydrogen project in Brazil. So what I mentioned in relation to the regulation also applies for financing. What we have is enough for developing a project of hydrogen in Brazil. We have seen even the Brazilian main ECA and also commercial banks interested in financing this type of projects. Since they are starting right now, of course, there are some small details that still need to be taken into account, but in a general way, we can finance, and let's suppose here, for giving an example, a industrial plant that will produce artificial hydrogen, let's suppose a green hydrogen, how it will be financed and what are the types of legal structures we have for that. So initially, we always, with a project financing structure, we start from the end, from the main off-taking agreements. So in this case, for a company, a plant that will be producing the green hydrogen, will have the main hydrogen purchase and sales agreement. It could be also a tolling structure that could be studied as well. So, but the main ones we have seen in the market right now will be purchase and sales of the hydrogen that is being produced by this company. And the receivables from this sale of the hydrogen will be the receivables that will sustain the repayment of the debt in a project financing structure. So apart from that, which will be the main agreement, we'll have the other agreements that will be necessary for this type of arrangement, the project financing structure. So we will have the main supply agreements, in this case, the PPA, that will, under which the company will be buying the electricity, and also the water supply agreement. So they will be the two main input agreements involved in this project. Will also involve eventual transportation agreements, depending on the modality that this company is agreeing and how to sell the hydrogen to its clients. And the key point, as I discussed in the previous question, is since there is no need for this additional concession, authorization, and license, it will be simplified whenever we compare project financing for other sectors, for example, for oil and gas, even for electricity, whenever you're going to need another type of agreement for this relationship between the company and eventually the government. So since that will not be necessary, the framework we have right now will be not only suitable for a project financing, but even, I would say, easier, less complex whenever comparing to other industries that we have in Brazil. So in brief, yes, we are perfectly ready for developing hydrogen, and I gave the example of green hydrogen project in Brazil in a project financing structure.
Great news, Paulo. I think we're coming to the end of this webinar. My summary here is that for Brazil, I think we need the government to act quickly on this national program of hydrogen. So we have clear rules, as Rafael mentioned, which are key for long-term investments in this industry. But we have a great potential, as Jose outlined, in various countries and projects under development with challenges related to transportation. But we are very optimistic related to the growth of this industry in the following years, Latin America and Brazil. And now I'll give you Rafael, Jose, and Paulo to provide your final remarks so we end this webinar. Rafael, do you want to say something? Your final remarks?
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. And I must say that Deborah, to hear Paulo talking about project finance for green hydrogen, I must say you guys double check my around where you're way ahead of everybody else is here. So congratulations for that, to think ahead. We are currently going through that experience in a project in Australia to structure our first project finance project for a hydrogen production facility in Western Australia, and indeed there's lots of specific challenges that are coming up, but it is, I confirm it looks at least it is going to be possible. So perhaps as concluding remark, I would say that we all know we are in front of a huge challenge to decarbonize our industries, our world, and hydrogen will be just one of the ways to contribute alongside electrification and other green gases. So we know that significant efforts will be needed to bring the cost down and to insert hydrogen where it makes sense. It's not going to be everywhere, but where it makes sense. Decarbonization efforts, including for hydrogen, are going to be costly, but we know that the alternative of not doing anything else will be even more costly. So I think we just have to commit to it. From an energy perspective, we've committed to do our share. We've committed to be carbon neutral by 2045. And that includes, in terms of hydrogen, objectives of around 600 megawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2025 and 4 gigawatt by 2030. So starting from less than 1 megawatt today, this is clearly, I'd say, I'd call that a bold endeavor. So thank you very much for the opportunity and looking forward to those projects with you guys.
Thank you so much, Rafael, for your contribution here. It's an honor to have you on board with us. Very interesting, very ambitious plan, and I'm sure you reach those goals. Jose, do you want to provide your final remarks?
Yeah, sure. The potential that green hydrogen has, especially in Latin America, is a whole new paradigm, different than the economics and the infrastructure related to hydrocarbons. So we've been used for many, many years to think in terms of production, transportation, and use of natural gas, treatment of natural gas, availability of natural gas, import of natural gas, etc. Same with oil. Now with hydrogen, things start changing. Hydrogen, every single country has the possibility to produce hydrogen, contrary to natural gas and crude oil. So that changes completely the economic equation and the opportunity that different companies and countries have to do projects. The ready availability, subject of course to technology and capital, but at least the basic foundation for the obtainment of hydrogen is something that every country has. And every country is going to start figuring out the ways, and ENGIE is an excellent example of how, thanks to the efforts of private industry, things have started to happen, and to demonstrate the capabilities of hydrogen. Every country is going to start doing something in respect to hydrogen, and in many cases, it is going to increase the supply, either in the form of pure hydrogen or in the form of low carbon products for the global market. And we've seen many industrial revolutions, many cycles. Eventually, capital costs come down, technology is improved, and things start taking off in a way that is truly affordable. I personally believe that on the hydrogen side, we're going to see one of those cases where we're going to be amazed when we look back 5 or 10 years from now and how uncertain or dubious we were that the capital and the technology were going to allow for the massive use of green hydrogen. I believe we're going to get there. And countries are helping in creating ambitious targets and goals, spurring demand, encouraging the private sector, and helping the private sector to do their part. This is something that every country is going to be able to participate and benefit from.
Great, Jose. Very interesting. Let's see, exciting times within this energy transition movement globally, right? Let's see. Let's hope for this potential to become concrete. And Paulo, finally you, can you give us your final remarks, please?
I will echo the other panel colleagues that there is a great potential for hydrogen market in Latin America, and especially in Brazil. So we have seen some studies putting Brazil very well positioned to be one of the main producers globally, especially due to the, I would say, green profile of the energy matrix of the Brazilian economy. So we have seen studies pointed that the cost of production in Brazil can eventually be the half of the price of the global average. So that is a great opportunity Brazil cannot forget and cannot put aside. So in order for that to become true, and bringing back to my legal regulatory side, I would say that Brazil should follow a path that maintain as simple as possible the rules of the game, trying to avoid imposing barriers or anything that could lock the development of the market. So while we discussed about eventual concessions, authorizations, licenses, we should keep as simple as possible. And again, the way the market is right now, the regulation is sufficient for developing any project, including with a more complex financing structure. So to finalize, I will quote here one phrase from the National Hydrogen Program, which is the item 5.4C, that whenever providing the guidelines for the legal regulatory framework, it says, quote, observe that the regulation should remain open to market conditions and avoid barriers and technological lock-in, unquote. So I hope the government pays attention to this point, and whenever moving forward with these definitions on small points of the regulatory framework, try to keep it to the minimum as possible in order to enable the market to develop all this innovation that we need in order to have a very efficient market in Brazil. So thank you very much, Deborah, and thank you, my colleagues, to the panel.
No, I thank you again, everyone here, our audience. Thank you, Rafael Barro. Thank you, Jose Valera, Paulo Raggi. So we end this webinar, and I invite you all to continue watching the other webinars from Mayer Brown's Energy Transition Series. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.